Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. This is Monday, March 3rd. And I think I just published a video. I scheduled one, and I don't know. It's all messed up. So you can schedule a video to go up in the morning. I've been forgetting. And so I thought I published one this morning. I scheduled it, but I don't know if you schedule it, goes back to the original date that you uploaded it. So I'm trying to figure that out, like even as we speak here. But I want to do a little voiceover that's going to be the introduction to the 183rd edition of the Journey series. And it's going to cover some, things that I think of interest about character formation and the fall of saints and spiritual people. But to start off with, I looked at my phone and Twitter had recommended something from Juanita Broderick, who is, somebody who was a Clinton nemesis. I can't remember exactly. She had, I think, sued Bill Clinton. I forget what that's all about. But she is popular on Twitter in the right-wing community. And occasionally Twitter recommends something from her. And she was something was like, I can't believe this. And she had reposted something saying that there are ties between Ukraine and the second Trump assassination attempt. This is kind of where I want to go with this. I want to get into some of the Trump stuff, and the left wing's continually freaking out about it. But the right wing and Trumpers, I mean, everything happens like this, where people just make shit up based in their emotion, right? Changing the facts to fit your feelings is sort of the psychological that comes out from the counseling psychology world, a term that you change the facts of your life because you feel a certain way. Like you're angry at somebody, and you start making the things that they do or have done to you worse than they are. Things that were unintentional, things that maybe weren't even bad. And you start finding a way to demonize somebody. Like somebody could be treating you really well, and you decide that you're going to, whatever reason, you just get tired of them, or you get angry at them for some reason, or you're just angry in general, maybe not even at them. And you start changing the events of your life. I mean, everyone's had this happen to them and have probably done this within, inside your internal world, where you just start making things up because you feel a certain way, right? Maybe you have a good job, and it's you have a job that pays well and suits your personality, and you're the kind of person you are, and it's actually, it's a good thing. It's something that's positive in your life, but you go through a negative state, you get into a negative state, and then you start complaining, maybe find other people at work or who do the job and complain about it. I mean, it's one of the reasons I've been able to stay on YouTube as long as I have, because this is what I talk about and be grateful. Because when you work for gratitude, you look for the good things. You look for ways to be grateful, and you look for everything coming from God, which is the most important part of it. That God's given you this thing, whatever it is, and there's always going to be shit attached to it. There's always going to be negativity, right? There's always going to be things that aren't as good. And you don't act like a victim, because everything's coming from God, no matter what's happening in your life. That's some of the Sajmark teachings, be grateful for miseries as divine blessings, and the wrongs done by others. There's 2 maxims. 10 maxims, there's maxim 5 and maxim 7 are about being grateful for things that seem like they suck, right? I mean, they suck because of just the way that we think about things, but on a spiritual level, they're liberating us from our internal grossness. They're helping to clean away things that are blocking our connection to God. So on the surface, they seem like bad things, problems, undesirable things, but on a deeper level, they are blessings. And so when you feel some sort of emotional things, negative emotions, then you start thinking about things based in those negative emotions, right? And, this happens a lot with the Republicans. I mean, I don't see it with the Democrats because I don't get as much, like, I don't get so many Twitter suggestions or video suggestions or people here who comment that are liberal Democrats who believe you watch CNN and believe they've drank the Kool-Aid of the Biden. I don't have as much interaction with those people. But the stuff from the right wing is always like this, where, there was this thing that happened with Zelensky, and I believe it was a real organic event. I think the people, they were pissed at each other. I think Trump had talked shit about Zelensky, and he's got some kind of personality disorder, and he's being propped up by these warmongering people in his country. And he decided to go in the Oval Office and run his mouth and litigate this, his case to the American people and the liberal media. And he didn't think Trump would Trump. Like, he didn't think Trump is like really like what Trump is, whatever it is. Or whatever reason, he wasn't willing to sign that mineral deal. And now he's fucked. He's just fucked. Because, Trump is just a petty person. And Trump's feeling himself. And, the Ukraine needs America more than America needs the Ukraine. And, whatever happened with the military-industrial complex, all these things I talked about in my other videos. But then people just make stupid shit up. Oh, they find ways to, well, let's tie this into Soros and the Clintons, or, oh, let's tie this into his assassination attempt, which was fake and staged, which we know because it's disappeared. And we knew what had happened. The first one was a goof. So the second one had to be. This was, performative. It was political theater. And so it had nothing to do with the Ukraine because it wasn't real. And if they had signed that mineral deal, this never would have been a thing, right? It would never have been a thing. And the Ukrainians aren't going to be that stupid that they're getting all this money and support from the United States that they would do something like that, right? It's just silly. It doesn't, it didn't happen. It's just something that's made up. People tie things together, and that just wrecks the truth community. And, this shows a lack of a desire to face the truth. And so what I want to talk about today, because this is part of that, is character formation. And the Sarsmarg meditation that I do, the master of the system is supposed to help you in every possible way to evolve spiritually. The idea that being a Sherpa, having a Sherpa, that the spiritual master of the system is like a Sherpa that would guide you up to the top of Mount Everest and be with you along the path. And so in the spiritual field and helping you, cleaning and transmitting and all these things, these services that are given, will help you spiritually. But character formation is 100% your responsibility. It's said over and over again, and it needs to happen. Developing good characters. And so, when I grew up, there was some of this left over from the 50s and the 60s. The 60s with the hippie generation and sort of the collapse of the bullshit American dream. The TV shows, if you go back and watch the TV shows of the 50s in America, My Three Sons and, the Leave It to Beaver and these shows, like the shows that I watched when I was a kid. It was just this wholesome, just pure Americana where everything was perfect and the family was perfect and there was no, dysfunction in the family. It was all bullshit because, people were just as fucked up then as, now. It was people hid it better. There was more superficial, things, more decorum, less, vulgarity, and less, the things that have just kind of devolved into whatever we see now. But the divorces were happening and the bad stuff was happening and all of it. And I guess it probably was better a little bit, but, it was still fake, right? And so there was this sense of character building. And there was a push in schools and people went to whatever religious function. We went to catechism and Catholicism. People had Sunday school, whatever it might be. And you would go and you would learn about developing good characters and the kind of person you were. This was stressed in society, right? And, it's in India where the Sarsmarg, meditation that I do started, character building was also a big part of the culture, and honoring your father and mother and all these principles, right? And even there, I mean, which is a very isolated culture. Like they kept their culture fairly isolated from modern day. But when the internet kicked in, every culture around the world went south. All these rituals, all these things that were passed down, generational societal norms were were kind of overrun around the world by the internet. Like now, kids were getting their training from the internet, and so young people have no idea when you talk about character formation, building a good character. Like there's no training. How are you going to get a good character when all you see is dysfunctional, shitty people on TV and the internet, and just no sense of any kind of respect towards culture and respect towards the elders in society, and the elders in society are worthless people who are selfish and all these things, competitive, and parenting, the families disappeared. And so kids don't get that, right? Kids don't even understand what that's about. And so lying becomes something that's like just what you do. You lie all the time. You manipulate, you lie, and that's what's modeled by the government and by the powers that be, and in your TV shows and your movies, and then on people on the internet, people lying and making shit up, and not having any sort of moral compass because there's no morality. And of course, we saw what happened with the Hollywood morality in the 2015 when that was unleashed on the American people and the globe, and pushing this morality of the so-called elite in Hollywood and the modeling industry and these various culturally deprived, character deprived groups of people, the wealthy people that believe all these things, all this gender stuff, and mentally ill people who are obsessed with their possessions and money power. And so there's no sense of any character formation. And then, the character formation back 30 years ago was part of the teachings of Sizemore system, that you had to work on your character. And there were some teachings about what good character was and the things that you needed to develop within yourself in the Sizemore system. And we all did it to whatever extent that we all dabbled in it, right? Like my character is better now than it was when I started. And I've stressed some of these things. And certainly, seeking the truth, right? There's another way of looking at this where you're, people who take philosophy or major in philosophy and some of these, courses where there's logic, like people learn how to be logical in college. And again, this is, just a way of thinking about some training that you might have to be logical and develop critical thinking and, question your own bias and taking account of your own prejudice and your own emotions, and learn to, understand the lens in which you see the world and start, really seeking the truth, right? Because people in the truth community are highly emotional, or, feel cheated by the government, feel lied to, indoctrinated. The right-wing people are just crazy, and, they're really emotional. And when you're really emotional, it's hard to see the truth because your emotions cloud, the changing the facts to fit your feelings, right? And a lot of that comes from a lot of this situation comes from religions and religious indoctrination. And so there's a two-part thing, and I want to talk about my system and its fall, like the collapse of the system, and because I just got some information about this clown Dodgy and his family that I thought would be of interest, not only to my people watching the Journey series, but all of you as well here, because it's the original fall. So when you have a spiritual being, a saint, or you have a culture that's connected to spirit, some sort of, tribal situation where there's a system in which the tribe, the culture, has in it a provisions for connecting with divinity or spirit, whatever it might be. And it might not be the best system, but at least it's something. At least people grow up with this idea that you're supposed to connect to God or the spirit world or nature, whatever it is. Like whatever kind of, some of the things are going to be, weird and not appropriate. Yes, they're going to develop some problems with it, but at least it's sincere in some way. And then most importantly, you have these people, these higher developed souls that come down who have, reached a level of spirituality, and they're coming with a movement. Like their purpose here is to help elevate the relationship between people and divinity within them. And they're going to bring about some teachings and some revelations. At some point, people learned that we have a soul. Like people didn't know we had a soul. So that was something. That happened in ancient India years and years ago, like 200,000 years ago. There's these things that happen, right, where people learn something, and all of a sudden people like, oh wow, we have souls, and it changes the whole way that you look at your life, right? What comes along with that is past lives and future lives. That you have a soul that is eternal, and you have a short-term life here that is temporary. You have the 70-year, 80-year, 90-year life, even 1,000-year life, when there's times where people live longer in different yugas, whatever it might be. But it's a small, temporary experience where your soul is in a body. Even if it was 1,000,000 years, it would be small compared to eternity, right? The length of the entire universe, whatever that is, right? The universe eventually ends, but it's eternal, right? There's it's beyond what people can conceive of time. The beginning of the beginning of the universe and the end of the universe. Whatever amount of years that is, one cannot contemplate that amount of time. It's not forever, but it might as well be forever, right? Unless it's a year away before the universe implodes on itself, right? And so we're so far away from that period of time where the universe implodes that it's not even something you have to worry about as a human being. It's not going to happen in your lifetime, right? But if it was next week, well, that would be significant. The end of the universe where it implodes on itself and then it starts all over again. But in either case, there's some point that we realized we had souls. And that was a big deal, right? So there was these teachings that came in from various spiritual people, say, sent down here, that were, disseminated and made it across the globe eventually, and, these things over time. And there were revelations that people had, and it helps understand what we're doing here. Like there's a purpose. If we have a soul, then there's something beyond our physical material purpose, these things, right? But in that, when these higher developed souls come down, there are people who realize that the power that people would have in terms of their belief of God, their spiritual inclinations, their religious tendencies, that people would do for God things that they wouldn't do for anything else, for their country, for their family. I mean, their relation with God was something that when it was controlled or manipulated, you could control people in a way that was beyond any other control, right? So my understanding about this is, I talk about this in my book, The Choice, I believe, quite a bit. Some of the breakdown of the population. So in the human population, there is 10% of the people are just like evil. They have demonic tendencies. They're just whatever it is, 1/10. Because a lot of things are 10%, right? Like 10% of the population is left-handed or gay or something that isn't like what's considered the majority, introverted or dyslexic, these kind of things. You have these various types of, and usually what people have one thing in their life, one thing about them, where you're about 10% of the people, whatever it might be, and 90% of the people are one way and 10% are the other. And so, the 10% of the people are just like evil. They have evil tendencies, and for whatever reason. And another 10% are just like saints. They're just, really connected to God and just really good people. And then everyone else is like what we consider sheeple, right? They're influenced by these two sides, like the battle of these 10% of the evil versus the good people. It's not necessarily a battle like we would think of as a war, but some sort of, way of the humanity goes in one way or another, right? And so, people are influenced by these two things because everyone has that in them. They have the ego and they have the soul. And so People are, depending on what goes on, a lot of people just have sheep-like tendencies. Say 80% of the people or whatever it might be. And the two sides kind of pull out one or the other from the majority of people. Like right now, we're all tending to be selfish and we're tending towards the evil side, right? Because of the way that things go and the people running the system, the people in power are evil, or people who have been influenced by evil in some way, have been compromised. And some people just have they're murderous, not even murder, like demonic tendencies. Like they get off on evil stuff, like things that everyone considers as inhuman and abhorrent. Like a villain or a monster in a horror movie or something. They get off on torturing people and seeing other people suffer and seeing the world burn and the whatever it is, right? And so whatever, their souls come down and they just have these tendencies. They have no moral compass, and they're just completely screwed up inside in some ways, like anti-God, like they're anti-God people. They're against the divine order. And so character formation, they want the opposite. They want to degrade the world, whatever people think of like as devil worshippers and things, but there's just sociopaths, but there's something else going on there beyond all the things that we categorize people as. And in that, they end up getting control of these religions, which is the opposite of what you would want. You have people who have demonic tendencies and they don't believe in God, and yet they run these religious organizations that were started by some higher developed soul that came down. If we think about Christianity, Jesus came down as a higher developed soul, and he had specific teachings and a lot about compassion and these other things to impart to his followers. And then over time, this powerful religion was created. It broke up into these various subcategories, little offshoots. But in it, you have evil people running all these things. People who don't really believe in God. People who are pedophiles and these other things, right? In these various, churches and Catholicism and things. And so this is what happens. But it started off as something pure. And it's responsible for all the other bad shit that happens. Because when you don't have real religion and you don't have real spirituality, religion is never great, because it's just it's kindergarten to real spirituality, where you have a direct relationship with God. But when you have a direct relationship with God and you cultivate that relationship, it keeps you from being a piece of shit, because the divinity within you is there, and you have compassion and you have empathy and you have God's love, and you can feel things, and it keeps you from going south and becoming a horrible person, because you have this relationship with your soul and the divinity within you. It precludes your whatever tendencies you have. Like some part of you is connected to God, saying don't do that, like just and when you do make mistakes, you feel bad about it, you regret, you want to redeem yourself, right? Unless you get so depressed and you feel so much like a piece of shit that you just you die, like you just give up. But at least you don't go south and become some evil person, right? And so those of you who don't know this stuff, because this will go into the Journey series as well, but some people really don't understand what I do in the Sajmark system. There were three masters in the system: this guy Lalaji, Babaji. They both had the same name, Ramchandra, and they were from North India, where there isn't a lot of saints and higher developed souls. North India people are it's where like Bollywood is, and there's more Muslim people there. It's colder, and there's a lot of warriors there. A lot of people eat meat there. They're not vegetarians, and they were on the border of India and these other countries, and these various invading groups, right? The Aryans invaded, and Genghis Khan, whatever, Genghis Khan, whatever the correct pronunciation is. The Mongolians, these other people, right? They were warlike people that were on the borders of India, and so they developed these. People had more warlike tendencies, right? And this is where business has developed. What used to be, which was Mumbai now, used to be Bombay, became the business, New Delhi, Delhi, these places there, northern cities that were more business oriented. And in the south, they developed the Brahmins and the more spiritual and religious people. But these two first masters of the system were in these rural towns in northern India that were full of dacoits, they called them robbers and criminals and things. But they developed this spiritual capacity and, developed a system of cleaning and transmission to help people connect to the divinity within them and this idea of character formation. And it was supposed to be, barely an organization, as grassroots as possible. These preceptors were made, and you would, as a preceptor, you would give these people sittings. People would come to your house. Like I went to my preceptor's house. He was a former boomer hippie, or he was a boomer hippie that went over to India. All these people were seeking spirituality, and I went to his house, and he gave me these sittings where you sit across from the person, and they transmit to you and clean your heart, and then give this transmission, and you'd be able to experience this divine condition. And it was transformative to those of us who felt it. Not everybody does. Not everybody gets into it, but those of us who do, it's just beyond anything, in terms of enjoyment or whatever. You just wanted to feel this way. And there was these gatherings, and you'd go to India, and there was these times where it was more intense and more profound, and had more profound on your inner condition. And as you develop this spiritual condition, you start having a relationship with the divinity within you. You're supposed to work on your characters, and some people did and some people didn't. And so the third master of the system was a Brahmin named Sharaji, and he was like a person who was highly functioning. He was the CEO of his company. He worked, it was very successful professionally, really smart. He had traveled and been to Europe, and he grew up in he had gone through a Christian school, so he was well versed in cultures around the world. He just understood people. He spoke, over 20 languages, 29 languages, or just all these things. He had all these capacities. And he was a really hard worker. He worked tirelessly, both doing spiritual work and material work. And he was just impeccable character, someone who was, had probably perfectionist tendencies. And, he followed this system, and the second master system, Babaji, was like a Yoda-like character who was just, not like other people. He was just innocent and almost childlike. And he, developed all his knowledge from his spiritual journey. He gave up on reading books and things, and he just connected to God whenever he wanted an answer to something. And so he spent all of his time doing work for God. Every second of his life, every atom in his body had one purpose, was to serve God. And he had this sort of unique spiritual life, right? And the way that they would choose a successor, they would transmit their own spiritual essence into the successor, their chief disciple. And so this thing could have went on forever, right? Where there would be the essence of this energy would be transmitted, and which is the ideal behind all these religious organizations in India and worldwide, where Jesus would leave a chief disciple with Peter. And if Jesus could have transmitted his essence into Peter's heart, and Peter would have that soul, have that part of this his Jesus' soul in his heart. That's the idea. People are supposed to have an inner Jesus, right? That would be the ultimate. If you were a Christian, if you had Jesus inside you, guiding you through your existence, where Jesus' actual soul was inside of you, and was you were intercommuning with it. It was helping you navigate through your life, right? And that was now available in the Sajmark system through not just for the master of the system, but everybody else. There you would have a connection to the higher developed soul that would be there helping you navigate through your material life and your existence, and help you build the character and create the character of your internal world, where you would just be a good person, and you would seek honesty, and develop these integrity and compassion and empathy and all these like a spiritual discipline where you wouldn't engage in things that were of lower nature. You would just like whatever it might be, drugs and I mean just or even if you're watching something, you wouldn't connect with it. Like if you had to see something in the world or on TV, you would be able to detach yourself from it and not get sucked into whatever the violence and the pornography and the negativity that you have to experience in life. It wouldn't affect you in some way, right? Where you'd be tempted to engage in behaviors that are like against the spiritual the spiritual journey that you're on, that are going to deviate from your spiritual course. And then of course the fall of saints, and in all these higher developed souls that have come down, the majority of them have fallen at the end of their life. It just happens. It's like a spiritual gravity because of the circumstances on planet Earth where people are tempted. Like they start, you see this with people who are successful and famous, this idea of character formation. People who are successful, they end up having really shitty characters. They start feeling themselves and they, oftentimes they feel victimized because they're criticized and they feel unloved and they feel unvalued and they feel underappreciated. They feel like people don't, they feel like their fans are like sucking energy from them or whatever it is, right? Their followers or whatever it might be, whether it be spiritual people or politicians or famous athletes or celebrities. They are way worse when they die than they were when they began, right? They had something, maybe some charisma. They had something, maybe something special about them, but it was perverted in some way by the system, by the, and they end up being like just abominations by the end, right? The fame and the power they got corrupted them in some way and turned them into something worse. You see it all the time. They might start off pure with like good intentions, and the system eats them alive and turns them into some kind of demonic, egotistical, self-centered, feeling sorry for themselves, pity party pieces of shit, right? And it's a systemic thing because it happens so much to these people who gain success and they lose their way. And you have this with saints and higher developed souls, and then they take the religion and they use the power of the teachings like they've done in Christianity. There's power in Jesus's teachings, in religious teachings, and they've used the power, the power of the Bible and the story to manipulate people and turn them against their own spiritual tendencies. And instead of connecting with God, they do the opposite. And then they become these materialistic people because the original purpose of Jesus's life and his teachings are now been corrupted and are in the hands of the evil people that, manipulate and control the masses. I sometimes I have this thing. I just went to check on I was just about to eat breakfast. So I have this Instapot that pressure cooks and does all these things. And I cook kasha, sometimes millet, sometimes quinoa, but usually kasha. It's like buckwheat. It's my favorite of the things. And I cook it in the Instapot, and then it's cooking while I'll start video. And, I do these other things that I take in the morning. I'm taking this potassium stuff that someone recommended, which I'll probably talk about in a future video. It seems to be working. It's subtle. Before I eat, I have these other things. And I went to go eat breakfast, and, sometimes I'm a little bit discombobulated. I have a routine, and I looked at the pot, and I'm like, I don't think it cooked. There's nothing worse than I have it with eggs. So I cook the eggs, and if I haven't cooked the kasha, I didn't turn on the Instapot. Then I have these hot eggs, and I have to wait 20 minutes for the, it's a kind of a nightmare. But I touched the pot, and I'm like, it didn't cook, and I looked at it, and some part of me, chose to do that, like to check it. Like I usually don't check it, but some part of me realized I hadn't. Like I wasn't aware consciously that I didn't turn it on like I thought I had, because I just do it every day. But some part of me just like, sometimes I hear things like, or just, there's something like, I become aware of it that in my experience as a person, I think something has happened or I've done something that I haven't. But something that's beyond me. And, this is a simple thing. It's just my breakfast, but, sometimes it has bigger implications. Where if you're like I was in a good state because of what I'm talking about here. I'm more aware spiritually, and you can hear things. You'll be told, you'll be warned, and you'll like an idea will come to you, and you'll have to check on something. It could be something life saving, right? And people, when you develop a spiritual capacity and you're connected to the divinity within you, this sometimes you ignore the thing, sometimes at your own peril, right? So, but you hear these things like just something. Anyways, so getting back to it. So in the Sajmark system, this Master Chargy was really in poor health in like 2007 and 8. He wasn't able to travel anymore. 2007, 8, 9. And he hadn't found a successor. At one point, he nominated this guy, a young guy, and the guy withdrew. He got death threats, and people were being pricky to him because they didn't develop character qualities, and there's politics and bullshit that happens in any kind of organization, unfortunately, and there's a lot of bad things that go with it. And so Daji nominated this guy Kamlesh Patel, who was one of the people that was in his inner circle. And I had good experiences with Kamlesh. Like, I knew he was a spiritual person. I knew he had this potential just from my personal experiences. So it was easy for me to accept that he would be a good successor to Chargy. And in 2015, Chargy died, and Daji took over, and he immediately started to change things. And he created this thing called Heartfulness. Now, Sahaj Marg means the natural path in Sanskrit. Sanskrit is supposed to be the original language, and the language that's most resonates with spirituality, with your, like just the tone of the words, and like they say English is the language of business, which makes sense, right? Like language that is the best for material business, like people who are successful in every country who are business people have to learn English. It's just something that happens if you want to be successful in the business world. They, like, for example, in English there's one word for love. In Persian there's like hundreds or something like that, like some the language of Persia, like the language of Iran. So you have these various languages that your language has an effect on what kind of person you are. And English has a very material type of effect. It makes you very material, competitive. The language of business and war and these things, right? And so the language you speak, it affects you as a person, right? So Sanskrit has a very spiritual, the words themselves. Atman is a word for soul. Like, soul is a good word, but Atman's a better word. The Atman, right? So you have these things, these words that are that resonate on like this, the idea of Om, the sound of Om, which is supposed to be harmonious with the divine current. And so this language, Sanskrit, this word Sajmarg, means the natural path. That this system that we do, the meditation, is supposed to be the natural path. But Daji wanted a more user-friendly term, because when you say Sajmarg, to Americans, they're like, fuck that, that sounds weird as fuck. I don't know, what does that even mean? Like, they're not, And most people outside of India, and even India, they don't speak Sanskrit. It's a lost language. And so they don't even know what it is, right? So, they might know some words that are still, part of their language that come from Sanskrit. Some of the words in Hindi come from Sanskrit. And some of these words in English, these words that are, universal, like you have an ancient language, and some of the words come from, some of these ancient language, even English and some of these things, right? So I noticed when I was in India, different people came from all over the world. And sometimes they came from different places in India. And so they would do the announcements, and they would do the announcements in English, and then in Hindi, and then in Tamil, because the people were South India, they spoke Tamilian, they were Tamil, was their culture and their language. And, Southern Indian people have Tamil. Northern Indian people speak mostly Hindi. And there's, and a lot of them speak English. And so they would do these announcements in various languages. And oftentimes they would ask for volunteers. And no matter what language it was, they would use the word volunteer, the English language, the word for volunteer, they would use it, even if it was like some kind of European language. If there's people from France or, the various European countries, if they were doing the the announcements in any language, it was always volunteer, because there was no other word for volunteer in these languages, because it's a very English concept. It's a Western concept, right? The idea that, again, the language of business, that you work for money. And so, there would be no sense of volunteerism in other cultures because there's no monetary system. You wouldn't volunteer. You would just do the work that needed to be done because you were in a family. You weren't in a tribe. There's no concept of being a volunteer, because if something needed to be done, you would just do it. You weren't patted on your back. Oh, you're doing this work without getting paid. What a great fucking person you are, right? Because if something needed to be done, you would do it. You wouldn't just be, I'm volunteering, right? So it's a very English concept. It's a very European Western concept to volunteer and work for free. Like this idea that you would work for free. But before there was money, everybody worked for free, right? So in the Sajmark system, the idea of Master Charji was this, he worked tirelessly. He said the reward for work in spirituality is more work. God's sharing some of God his work with you, right? There's divine work that has to be done. And he's sharing this, allowing you to participate. You're not, oh God, you're lucky I'm doing this. You're lucky I'm here doing this, God. You're lucky I'm you have me. Like God's like giving you the opportunity to work and do divine things. And the reward for doing good work is more work. It's not a vacation. It's not material, some material possession. It's not heaven. It's not any of these things, right? It's there's no reward for it other than more work. Oh, you did good work here. Take some more work. Oh, you've successfully learned how to do this. Well, do this as well. And then your capacity grows. Your ability to do work for God grows, and you grow as a person. Your consciousness and your ability to do more things for God, right? Then you become, the powers you need to do that, and the consciousness and the knowledge you need to do more work comes to you, because you have to rise up to a higher level to do higher level work. So it's the reward is that you get more of God, right? The more work you do, the more God you receive, right? The more God is actualized in your system. Like it's a beautiful principle. So this other guy quits, and Charji's got 3 years left before he's going to die, and he nominates this guy Kamlesh. Kamlesh becomes his successor, the master and president of the system. And, there was lots of evidence that Kamlesh was going to do a good job. Everything that I knew about him, he was into the system. He was well studied in the principles and teachings. And when he started off, he seemed like he was like doing a good job. I thought it was, he certainly had the energy. He was transformed into this higher level of, service and abilities. And, started off seemingly good. But then he started to change things, and he changed the maxims, which was like really wrong. These principles, the spiritual principles. And he changed the name to Heartfulness to make it more user-friendly. But the Heartfulness became a separate organization. The original organization had various ways of, stopping it's just like the Constitution. It had bylaws and things to make sure that, if somebody was a shitty master, that they wouldn't wreck the whole system and wouldn't corrupt it. So he started to do these things, and they were business-oriented things. And he was from the Gujarati area, where they're known as business people like this, and his last name was Patel, and they're known for business. And he had all these business guys around him. And he started to run scams like the Brighter Mind scams, and join with these pro-Hindu organizations that were prejudiced against Muslim people, which is just not anything to do with Sajmark. Sajmark was open to all people. Anybody, any caste, any religion, any whatever, you were allowed to come in and participate. The women, like some things in India, women aren't allowed to do. All these things, right? Like it was just there for everybody, and there's supposed to be no personal prejudices. You were supposed to leave your bullshit behind you. Prejudice is talked about quite a bit as being the killer of spiritual growth and spirituality. There's a whole chapter of prejudice, but he joined this group called RSS, which is a paramilitary fascist group that's anti-Muslim. Like he just started doing things that were fucking wrong, and he started to glom on these properties. And one of the problems they've had in these sort of guru-based, corrupt organizations is that the masters of the system turn turn the organization over to their shitty kids. Like, they have these kings who are great men, and their kids are always pieces of shit, right? And that's what happens to, the kings, right? Because the kings, are they're not necessarily saints, but they're good leaders, and they're able to rally people, and they develop a kingdom. Not that I like kingdoms, but you know what I'm talking about here. But their kids are entitled pieces of shit, right? The prince, and they turn their empire over to this piece of shit who hadn't earned it and really just happens to be a son of a king. Oftentimes doesn't have the qualities in them, even if they are bad people, even if they're not selfish entitled piece of shit. They're not really, they don't have a leader in them. They're not really a king. They're not really, but they just happen to be born into that that situation, right? And so it happened with Chargy where some of the people in his and this was 2008 or 9, his health was starting to fail. And some of these senior people came over and said that they were going to, Chargy was going to leave the ashrams and the properties to his son Krishna. And Chargy was like fucking appalled that they would even question his integrity. And he got depressed for like a week. Like he just, and he got these, we have these whispers of the brighter world messages, and he got these messages saying, you got to snap out of it. Like he just was like devastated these people would, quit after all the work he did, right? But, now we have this guy, Kamlesh, who he has these two sons. And there's a guy I call the Dodgy Truther, who he's anti-Dodgy, anti-Kamlesh. And he sends me stuff. He's my one sort of link to the mission. I don't have any connection to the Heartfulness anymore. And I don't look at it, the YouTube. It's just, it's a corrupt organization now, it's clear that that's happened. So I've created this Gratefulness meditation for those people who started Heartfulness because I told them about it. And, some of them are doing this Gratefulness meditation, which is a free YouTube channel, services that they can have these sittings and things. It's going pretty well, right? I'm very happy with how it's developed, and it's gotten better over time. It's like it's a sort of a stopgap to the debacle that is the Heartfulness corrupt organization. And so this Dodgy Truther sent me something the other day, and Kamlesh has two kids named Sahaj and Marg. Again, that's the name of the system. And so it's funny that he would change the name to Heartfulness when his own kids were named Sahaj and Marg. And Chargy named his kids. For these Indians, they live a completely different lifestyle in terms of these arranged marriages and their relationship to the guru. And they're more, sheeple-esque in their, they don't challenge authority, right? Like there was a French woman who was a preceptor that was giving me sittings before I returned back to America and when I was going through this divorce. And Kamlesh was having these preceptors go to these companies and start, give the introductory meditations to these people, these like call centers and these corporate places. And she said they would interview some of the, people, and there were a lot of young people that were doing it. So they were doing this meditation they were given free meditation at these corporations, and it failed. It didn't work out, which Kamlesh does a lot of failures. But this French woman was interviewing these kids, and she asked them, like, what do they want to get out of their life? What is their goal for their life? And almost every one of them said, I just want to make my parents proud, right? And, how many Americans, she was taken aback by this because she's French, European, and they're even worse, their relationship with their parents. But how many, Western people, Americans and Europeans, would say that? Like how many people, like would say, I just want to make my parents proud. As a young 20-year-old person, you're pissed at your parents. You hate your parents oftentimes. But even if you had good parents, you love them. Very seldom does that become something where you think about your life. You just want to make your parents proud. But it still existed in India to some extent, this character formation, even with all the Western, influence being disseminated through the internet, because this is, a plague, the internet and the anti-character culture, low character, character development has, anti-parent, all of this, right? Anti-ritual, the ancient culture and cultural things. Respect for these things has been eroded by the internet and people, seeing how, all these people on the internet, young people, behave, and there's just this irreverence, right? And a hatred or a, resistance to authority, which we have. Like, Americans, we rebel. Like, there was a time where I was, when I grew up, Levi's jeans, if you didn't wear Levi's jeans, you were made fun of. Like, everybody in my school had to wear Levi's jeans. It was fucked up, right? Like, I didn't even know there's other jean companies. Like, if, you wore a different kind of jean, like, it's just the label and whatever it was, in Connecticut, this area I grew up. And I was later on I had my own kids. So it's like 20 years later or something. And I was in like some office, like a doctor's office, and maybe there's a Time magazine or something, I don't know, a magazine. It was talking about, or maybe I saw it on the internet. It was talking about how Levi's jeans, the company, was going bankrupt. I just saw a commercial with Beyonce, so it's come full circle, right? But this was like suburban preppies, and now they're being marketed, to another, demographic. But the reason Levi's jeans collapsed, because I thought everyone wore them, right? They were generational, they were the prime, they had these Lee jeans and Wranglers, but like this, Levi's was, in terms of where I grew up in that time period, they were like the jeans of, the youth. But at some point, the people my generation grew up, and their kids went, "Oh, those are my parents' jeans. I'll never wear those," because kids reject their parents' stuff, whatever it is, their culture, their everything. "Oh, those are the kind of jeans my parents wear." They would start making fun of you. Those are old people jeans, and so Levi's collapsed, and now I guess they've made they're trying to reboot with Beyonce, but this idea that your kids don't want to be like you. Your kids don't want to wear the clothes you wore. They don't want to do the things you do. They reject their parents. And that's a very Western thing. It's a plague that's gone around where instead of, you want to make your parents proud and you want to, become like your parents, you reject your parents and everything they stand for. Remember when there was this, the whole January 6th thing, you had liberal kids who were indoctrinated by the internet ratting out their conservative, crazy QB parents, this thing that happened because the American kids, the Seinfeld, where you want to get as far away from your parents as possible. You had to have a buffer zone. Your parents were in Florida, and you were in New York or wherever you were, and you would see your parents once or twice a year, and you would have this buffer zone between you and your parents. You couldn't wait to separate from them and, stick them in a nursing home or whatever, and you didn't want to, have any kind of, an intergenerational family where, the parents would be close and a part of raising your kids. You want to have some distance between you and your parents, right? The breakdown of the family. Now, of course, with the divorce and these other things, even more complexities are a part of it. In Sajmarg, they had these arranged marriages, and the arranged marriages were almost 100% successful. Now I'm sure not so much. But like they would be arranged. And, this idea that you would have faith in this guru or master, and sometimes the master was a piece of shit, a fake guru, like, exploitive. And a lot of times these arranged marriages were so your parents and your family could, would have some, it would increase their status, right? So this was, these, whatever these ancient European arranged marriages for kings and royalty, oftentimes were politically oriented or something like this. But the way the Sajmarg system would do it, the master of the system, would be able to, see the souls of the couple, and pick the other person that would be, it was just like a spiritual revelation. But for somebody who was just watching it, like I was there in charge, you would be outside and you have a group of people around him, and some Indian girl would stand up and say, "Charge, I need a husband." And he'd look around and he'd go, "Here, this guy right here." Right? And there'd be like, 100 people sitting there, and he'd pick some guy at the fucking audience. And if you were an American person and you did that, you would freak the fuck out, right? Because it's so random. It looked like he just happened. Hey, there's a guy over here. You guys are going to fucking spend the rest of your lives together, right? But there was this sense that this two people were supposed to be brought together. This girl was supposed to ask him, and this kid was supposed to be there, right? There's a time where Charji went out, and he was talking to these women, and he gave this incredible talk about loss of life, and how you deal with grief and these things. And he left. There was like between 12 and 20 women. I forget what it was. And after he left, the women were all talking, and every one of them had these were women from different countries, different parts of India, and they were, they didn't know each other, and every one of them had lost a child, and they all happened to be brought together, and he said this thing to them, and they all were, the spiritual work was done, and so, it would seem random, but it wasn't. It was some sort of divinely ordained thing. But in terms of the Western mind, these arranged marriages seemed just arbitrary and random and shit, and like it just didn't make sense. And oftentimes he would arrange marriages that would go against caste and regional prejudices. And there was one family, I talked to some of these people, these arranged couples, but they had just faith in him, and they would make it work, and eventually they had an incredible marriage. But like they had to go through these issues. The parents would reject it. Parents who weren't doing the meditation, or they had their own. They had their own way of their own arranged marriages that would benefit the family, that weren't spiritually oriented, right? But for Westerner people, Chargy said, I'm not doing it for Europeans and Americans and anybody outside of India, because it just always was a disaster. Because people wanted to choose for themselves, right? They didn't want to surrender this choice. They didn't want to have. And oftentimes they would. The negativity that come with it. It was these disastrous marriages. And so Chargy said, yeah, we're not doing that anymore, just because, people outside India just won't ever do it right. They won't, they're not trained for it. They have the, there's resistance to authority, and we're choosers, right? Like he gave this one talks about how the Western culture, you're always choosing. In spirituality, you make a choice and you live with it. You get married, you live with it, right? This idea that, God is giving you the perfect person, and that perfect person is sometimes a piece of shit, right? And it's what you need to evolve spiritually. So whatever you get for a spouse, you surrender it to God, and if it's a horrible person, you accept it. That's your lot in life. And there's a divine purpose for it, But for Westerners, we don't like that shit. It's one of the reasons I didn't divorce my ex when I had every reason to. Because, it's part of the system. I mean, thankfully she left me, right? Because I was committed, because of I believed in these principles that, I just got a piece of shit wife. Like that was just how I felt about it. It worked out because I evolved spiritually. It was good for me. Even though, she had all these issues and, mental issues and things like this, it benefited me. So, I accepted it as best as I could. Like I tried to be grateful for it. I worked towards gratitude, even though it was horrible. Like I've talked about it in depth in the Journey series. But it's, me believing in these spiritual principles. But anyways, I ate breakfast and I went to get to the central point here. So this dodgy truther sent me this stuff, with all this backstory here. And, like I said, these Indians would go to the master of the system and ask them to name their kids, right? Because they didn't think they had the ability. And this is, this is part of there's a good part of the Indian culture where they have reverence for elders. They have this idea that elders, they respect their elders and look up to their elders and listen to their elders and do what their elders tell them to do. When I first went to India, I was talking to somebody, and they said, let's go sit down. And there was this, it was a new ashram. And they just had these trees they put in there, and the trees had these like cement blocks around them, and there were a few chairs around some of the trees, but there weren't that many places to sit. And it was in Allahabad, India, and they had just built this ashram, so it wasn't fully developed. And it was everything else. There's no grass. It was just red earth, rare earth. This like sort of clay, like you'd see in Georgia and these other states, South Carolina, this red clay, this, and even in the West, area. And Western states. And we walked up to these kids, and they were sitting there, and they got up for us so we could sit down. I was in my 30s. I wasn't even that much older than them. But, this idea that children learn to respect adults and listen to them. But there's a part of it where they don't learn to think for themselves, right? So, ultimately, the system's about you connecting to God and God communicating, and you should be able to name your own kids names, right? That's how I always felt about this. But this culture, they'd ask the master. And Master Chargy told Daji, Kamlesh Patel, who was acting like he was his disciple. Kamlesh had later came out and said that when Chargy was made master and Babaji died, Kamlesh got into a car and had a gun and was going to shoot him, going to Babaji's house. but they couldn't find it. And it was a small area in northern India where, they'd been there so many times, the guy who was driving, and they couldn't find it. It was like some kind of, they were caught in some, divine warped, like to change the structure of the roads in some way that they couldn't ever get to Babaji's house. So he got out of the car like some kind of, from Boys in the Hood, right? This thing. But he had originally wanted to kill Chargy. And, and he acted like his disciple, and I don't know how much of it was sincere. But as soon as he became master, he started to monetize the mastery. And so, he had asked Chargy to name his kids, and Chargy called them Sahaj and Mark. And I met Sahaj, and I thought he was he just seemed like a good guy. Like he just seemed like a good spiritual person, like my one interaction with him. He was cultured, educated and refined, like he was like some kind of prince or something like this. And I never met his younger son, Marg. But it came out recently that these are Daji's kids. Daji had 7 pharmacies in Staten Island, New York area, where he moved to from India. And he was a pharmacist, and he started a pharmacy, and then he got all these other pharmacies. And in Chargy's last years, from 2007, he went to India, where he had two apartments there near the ashram, because he had a lot of money. He was a multimillionaire. Daji was Kamlesh. And he was instructed by Chargy to stay there in Chargy's last days. And he didn't go back to America. And his kids ran his pharmacies and his business for him. And they each played a role. And then in 2020, when COVID hit, they decided to create this medley pharmacy where they bought other pharmacies and wanted to create an online pharmacy in the New York area and then these other places around the country where they would deliver the pharmaceutical goods to people's houses. And it took off during COVID. And they got $170 million of investor capital, like you see on Shark Tank, because they had inflated the value of the company, right? The valuation of the company by forging documents. This is what the SEC report says, right? Not me, not reporters, but actually the government says this. And now there's this, I guess, a warrant out for his arrest or indictment. I don't know what they call it, but you can look it up. Medley Pharmacy, and I've showed people this before in these articles about it. And Daji's son is, wanted in the U.S. He's an American citizen, but he's hiding out in India. And they've created Medley India. Like they have a subsidiary of the company that's now defunct and gone bankrupt after they, according to the SEC report, defrauded investors of 170 million people. Some of the investors put in like 50 million or 70 million, and they just absconded with the money or whatever it is, right? His other son has gone through a divorce, which the Daji Truthers told me about, and I don't give a shit about this stuff. Like this stuff is just, I don't care about it anymore because I've accepted that Daji sucks and the Heartfulness thing has collapsed, and I just want to move forward. But he sends me these things, right? And he told me this stuff. Divorce isn't such a big deal for us, but in India, it is. And Chargy arranged their marriages, I assume. I don't know if the Gamar guy was married. I don't know. I don't know anything really about them other than I met the one guy once and this indictment. But they're all now in India. And the Saj guy is in this messy divorce. And the Daji Truther sent me a bunch of stuff on it where his wife, well, first he wanted to get divorced in America, but he can't go back to America. At least his brother can't. Like, I don't even know. Like, I don't know what they're doing in terms of the government, in terms of extradition. I mean, if somebody defrauds people out of, and it might be just a court ruling saying that these three guys can't ever run a company again. I'm not sure. Like, I read through whatever it was, the indictment. Again, I'm not, I only mild interest in this. All I need to know is there's fraud, which I already knew because the company collapsed. And I knew there's something had gone on, and now that there was this SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission report and investigation or whatever it was. And so his older brother, Sahaj, had this marriage, which I assume was arranged by Chargy to an Indian girl. But I think he met a French girl he liked more, and I'm not sure. Again, I'm just getting this second or third hand. And he wanted a divorce. But they got married in India. And it's a legally binding marriage in India. and she wants the divorce to happen in India. And there is multiple accusations, and it's like one of these messy fucking divorces, right? Which, these two things, divorce, especially for somebody of his, the master of the system, and indictment. So there's business indictment for his sons, and it looks like he's probably going to try to turn over the Heartfulness organization to his sons. Like they seem to be being groomed, and they seem to be a part of the whole thing, which is a big no-no. You can't do that because then it becomes a kingdom and not a spiritual. I mean, it's already corrupted. It's already fucked. And all these people know it. Like all the people that practice the system, and some of these are just saintly people. Like if you knew the people, you'd be like, oh my God, this person's like a saint. They're just amazing people in terms of their service of God. And they work on their characters and they develop their characters. But they haven't learned to think for themselves and break free from their cultural indoctrination, even the literature in the Sajmark system of the importance of the master of the system. Because this guy Kamlish has shit the fucking bed, right? And this happens over and over again. It happened historically, where there's something that's spiritual and helping people connect to God, and then the next thing you know, it's a materialistic piece of shit organization. I can't overemphasize the importance of this because spirituality, your relationship with God, is supposed to be pure, right? It's supposed to be a pure. That's why money was never. There's no money. There's no fees for any of the services in the Sajmark system. It's a volunteer organization in the sense that everybody works, does their work for, more work for God, right? You're getting to participate in God's work, and the more work you do, the more you'll get rewarded with more work. It's a very simple system. And that's from the people who come in the beginning and just start doing their own personal practice to people who volunteer and cook for large gatherings of people, and then all the way up to the preceptors and the masters of the system and all this work that they do spiritually, that the more work you do, like even the stuff I'm doing here, right? Like this is, I'm doing work for God to some extent in my YouTube channel and presenting some of these spiritual teachings. And so the reward is more work, which I've, been lucky enough to have some evolution, some realizations and some upward movement spiritually as a result of doing this work here, right? But in everything else, business, of course there's going to be corruption, because when you work for money and money is your God, of course you're going to have a poor character, right? Of course eventually you're going to fall. If you're a, militaristic type person, a war person, of course you're going to end up committing war crimes. Of course you're going to, do questionable things because you want to be a soldier, you're a warrior, right? You're a person who likes to fight and likes to dominate and things like all these other, whatever it is, right? As a celebrity, of course, you're going to get a big ego and people are going to, you're going to have fans and you're going to have a big head and you're going to, end up collapsing and your character is going to collapse, right? In all these other activities, the goal is a material goal. And whatever it is, the material goal, whether you want wealth or fame or power or money power or any of these other types of powers, you're going to get corrupted because you're not focused on God. You're not focused on becoming a better person. Your goal isn't to becoming the best person. Your goal is to become something else, like a celebrity or a politician or whatever. Your goal is to achieve something. And through that achievement, you think it comes with perks and rewards. You're better than other people. You've ascended above the common man, and you're a person of substance. And so a stature. And there's things that have to go with it. There are rewards, and you think about it that way, material rewards, and then, you end up devolving into a shitty piece of shit person who's focused on the materialism. But in religion and spirituality is really the real thing, a connection to the divinity within you. The reward is that you have God. But then when you start looking for material things and looking for, whatever it is, perks and privileges, and you start feeling yourself and thinking you deserve more because you're doing God's work, and people start worshiping you and you kind of dig it and these things. And that's the original fall, because the relationship with God should always be kept pure. And it hasn't been. And that's why we're fucked right now. Because if you keep your relationship with God pure, then every one of these other things that you do, people are a businessman, but you're also a person who's in a religion or a spiritual organization would be better, but religion would be good if you did the religion at least the way it's supposed to be done. If you're a politician, but you're also a person of God, you also have a spiritual side, then you won't get corrupted because your relationship with God dictates your relationship or your work as a politician, right? But when people break free from God in their religion and they break free from God in their spiritual life, and then the religion gets corrupted, then people don't have any access to God and the divinity within them. And so they just become a banker, or they just become a congressman, or they just become, an athlete, or they just become, a businessman, and they only focus on those things, and they don't develop good character qualities because why should they? Because the character qualities don't help them do their job, don't help them, do any of these other things, right? So when you're looking for the fall of humanity, it's always a spiritual fall first. When people disconnect themselves from God, then they disconnect themselves from their family, then they become selfish and competitive, disconnecting themselves from any sort of community and any communal responsibility. And now they're just in it for themselves, all of us in it for ourselves, working for selfish reasons, looking for monetary rewards and other rewards for our work, and feeling like, any kind of accomplishment is ours alone, has nothing to do with God, and we don't have any other divine purpose. So success and material success and comforts are the barometer, and pleasures are the reason for our existence. There's no other higher goal. There's no other, divine purpose. And so the things that were going to help us get the things we want, the qualities we want, the qualities that we have to achieve success are those of a sociopath and a narcissist. And so we embrace those qualities and characteristics. We look up to people like Trump and other people who are successful. And Trump is a person with very poor character qualities, as are all these other politicians and famous people. And we look at them as we want to be like them. We want to have what they have. And so then you have the de-evolution of the lack of, any sort of integrity and any sort of morals and ethics and things that just get in the way of business and success. Let me wrap this one up here and get into the other stuff. Okay, so I was going to get into the Zelensky things first. I have a video I saw this morning on my phone a little bit, and then I turned on the news, and if they don't say what I saw in the news, I'll go copy that with my phone, or if I can't find that. It's just around 10 o'clock now, and so it's the 10 o'clock news. And they're talking about Zelensky embracing diplomacy. So we'll get to that in a moment. Some of the CNN coverage and whatever. But this I felt is more important. There's two things I want to show you. This is the first one.
Also just something that maybe it's an inner demon, I don't know, but it comes out and it's fantastic for us when it does.
So that's J.J. Redick, the coach of the Lakers, talking about Luka Doncic when he gets into this state where he's screaming and he gets and he called it like having an inner demon. And it's fantastic when his inner demon comes out, right? So this is everything I'm talking about. Like he gets, Luka will yell and he gets into these states. And the two sports guys are going to embrace this idea of an inner demon. How great it is that Luka Doncic has an inner demon that comes out, and how wonderful the Lakers are playing well. And they've arranged this trade so that they can be relevant because the Lakers are, this franchise that is it's maybe the number one global franchise, at least in terms of basketball. And so they've arranged this Luka Doncic trade, and it looks like they will be a team that could be in the championship this year because of it, and the system will be rigged in their favor, and so all these things, right? But it's all because of his inner demon, and so that's the first piece. So I was watching this game a little bit, and Steph Curry does this celebration where if he hits a 3-pointer and gets fouled and has an extra foul shot, which is a 4-point play, he'll count up to 4 on his fingers. And Luka Doncic stole it, which, he's plagiarizing. But this is Brian Windhorst, and this guy, Greenberg, or whatever his name, they call him Greeny, talks about his inner demon.
I have described Brian Windhorst that way many times, as a man with an inner demon that comes out every now and again. Wendy, what?
Hell yeah.
I'm running.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. So, of course, the Blue Devils and the New Jersey Devils and these, the idea of a demon or a devil being, whatever you're doing in your sport, whatever it is, right? So I thought I would, speaking of demons and devils, So this came up.
Do you want to promote any music, by the way?
Oh yeah, I'm about to drop some country music.
Are you really?
I'm not putting out rap anymore. I'm doing country music. In the morning, yo.
Okay, so I was one of the first person. I was the first, I think, person to cover. I don't say the first because viewers sent me this with Chet Hanks, but I was the first person to cover Tom Hanks. I was the first person to cover Will Smith, Tom Hanks, and Ellen, because when I started questioning celebrity culture, I mean, when I got into it, because I never cared about celebrity culture, right? So when I started doing this as videos, I looked at these three people: Will Smith, Tom Hanks, and Ellen, and I said, they've been given this narrative. Like I knew these celebrities, I was, discovering these narratives and narrations that they did in reality TV, right? So this is back in 2014, something like this, maybe even before that, 2014 probably, 15. And 10 years ago. And in reality TV, they can make anybody look like a villain or a hero. They have these narratives, and they would create these. This is how they ran these reality TV shows, because there's no, necessarily a plot. I mean, they encourage things. The people who produce the show encourage interactions, and some of it's staged, but they don't have a script, right? It's not scripted, and then they have these storylines that develop. And they'll make one person the villain and one person the hero. And somebody made a video about this. They did their own reality TV show. They just, they made their own reality TV show. It's available somewhere. It's very interesting. And they showed how they could make the person look as a hero or a villain based in, even sometimes the same things that they said, right? Like they would just revert. So they would, change some of the, sometimes it looks like two people are in an argument or they're having an issue, and they're two separate events. That happen days apart, right? They through manipulative editing. And I thought about all this stuff with celebrities, and I thought, what about these people who are considered good people? They're very popular celebrities. They have overwhelming popularity. Lots of celebrities have some popularity, but they're controversial, like Madonna and some of these other people. But Will Smith, Ellen, and Tom Hanks were known as like the good guys. They have the good guy narrative. And I started questioning that narrative, saying these guys must be really pieces of shit to get that narrative, right? They must be doing bad shit. And of course now it's out there. All these other people have embraced these. Of course, Will Smith and Ellen collapsed. But, I covered this years ago. And somebody tipped me off to his son here. And I made a video about his Illuminati tattoo here. And he watched the video and he responded to me in a video. He didn't call me out by name, but because he called me dude. And because I said, why did you do this? Like, just explain. And I wasn't talking to him. I said, he needs to explain, why would you do this, right? And he said, because it's spiritual. That was his response to me. So, I mean, unless someone else made a similar video, of course, lots of people were covering this. But based on what he said, I'm like, I think he actually watched my video. And he was all upset, right? But I was saying, why would you get an Illuminati tattoo right over your heart? Like, why would you do? What does it mean? It must mean something to you. They have a story. You ask people about their tattoos, and they'll tell you a long story of what it means and what it represents, and and so when you get something like that, and he didn't have all this stuff then. He just had this Illuminati tattoo and like a couple others, and he said it meant he's spiritual. He thought it was spiritual to have the fucking eye of the pyramid and the capstone on the dollar bill in the center of his chest, right? So.
You'll be gone for good.
Okay.
Yeah, you're all packed up and leaving Hollywood.
Wow.
In a town where life happens so fast.
He sings better than I would thought he would. I'm going to give him credit for having some talent here, because he was not a good rapper.
I should have known that this would never last.
Wow.
His mom played the devil in various shows. In this one show, she played a demon. She played a satanic worshiper in, I think, one of the Tom Hanks Bosom Buddies episode. Like, I documented this. And then another one, she played a woman who took off her hair and she was like a vampire or zombie or something. So she's had a couple of these demonic things. there's a video of Tom Hanks where he's like doing gross sexual things dressed up as a woman when he was in the show Bosom Buddies. And it's like he's like spreading his legs and pretending he's, I just don't want to get into it. It's gross. Like, you can't even show it. It's so gross. Like, they're weird people, the Tom Hankses.
Would never last.
Is your country music pivot like the where most musicians do rap and then they're like, I'm not black anymore, and then they do country?
I don't really have any plans. You know what I mean? I'm like the Joker.
You're like the Joker.
Do I look like a guy with a plan?
He's the Joker. No, you don't. He's had drug issues and baby mama issues.
Yeah. I'm like a dog chasing cars. I wouldn't know what to do with it if I got it.
He's like, what the fuck?
Batman, you complete me.
He's got ADHD or something, so.
Go.
Do you want to promote any music, by the way?
Okay, so Tom Hanks, Chet Hanks was the Island Boys before the Island Boys. Okay, so this is MSNBC. Zelensky enacts true diplomacy as the GOP scrambles. Now, I just saw something. This is, I think, from yesterday or last night. So this was from Sunday. Today's Monday, the 3rd of March. And at 10 o'clock, I watched something, and I might have to copy it. I taped it in case. I'm hoping that he has all the stuff here, so I don't have to, whatever. We'll see what he says. I saw the beginning of this.
The GOP is scrambling in the wake of Trump's train wreck of a meeting Friday with Ukrainian President.
Yeah, they're not scrambling. They're in the power position. So, I thought about this. This shows you how divided we are. And the Republicans would do the same thing with Joe Biden. If a foreign leader came in and disrespected the White House after we gave them a shit ton of money, the American people and the American news media would be 100% behind the president, regardless if you were Republican or Democrat or whatever, because it's just what America used to do. When I grew up, that's how it was. And before that, even more so, right? Again, the character degradation and things, but there was some loyalty to your country. And I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing, because America's fucking, like I said in my last video, we're the arms dealer of the world. But, that's what would happen. Like, if you're fighting an enemy, you gotta, the idea of an alien invasion where humanity would come together to fight off the aliens as a way to unite, that's a good, the Project Blue Beam theory, right? That's a good, whatever, right? But for him to come out, Zelensky came in like a punk after receiving a shit ton of money, and no matter what you wanted to say, he was ungrateful as fuck, and he wanted more, and, he wanted us to get dragged into some kind of military situation with Russia, and, whatever Trump is and whatever J.D. Vance is, this was, a affront to the American taxpayer, right? This was a fuck you to the American taxpayer, what Zelensky did. Like, whether you want to say it's staged or not, but in terms of the official story, which this guy believes in, the Republicans aren't scrambling because we don't have to give money to Ukraine, and most Americans don't want it. If they did actual polling, I would say upwards of 70 to 80% of Americans are like, fuck Ukraine, right? Even the ones who used to have their flag on the fucking lawn.
Volodymyr Zelensky. Today, House Speaker Mike Johnson had a new line of attack on Meet the Press.
Something has to change. Either he needs to come to his senses and come back to the table in gratitude, or someone else needs to lead the country to do that.
In other words, he believes Zelensky should resign if he does not follow Trump's lead. Funny how he struck such a different tone towards Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Okay, let me just say this first. Zelensky needs to resign because his people are fucked right now, and he just fucked them even more. That's why he would have to resign, because he's in a weak position, and Trump is a petty piece of shit. Like, Trump is not, Trump is really petty, and he doesn't fucking, he's got the American people's behind him in the sense that we don't want to shell out for more foreign wars. That's a known thing. America does not want to spend our money in Israel and these other countries, right? More, Israel has more support because of various reasons, but America doesn't want to spend money. It doesn't want to send troops over to any of these places. We're done with all those fucking wars that we had in Iraq and Afghanistan, regardless of the military-industrial complex, regardless of whether it's going to save our currency. In terms of the average American person, they just see money that should be going into our, needs when we're, going more and more into debt, national debt, and our inflation is off the charts, and people can't afford groceries. Like I've said this over and over again. We all know. You guys all know. It's obvious, right? And so Zelensky, who's, he needs to make a case to the American people, and he did the opposite. He fucked it, right? He fucked his country, and he's, the money ain't flowing now, bro.
I'd like to see Putin defeated, frankly. He is an adversary of the United States. But in this conflict, we've got to bring an end to this war. It's in everybody's interest.
Johnson wants Putin defeated, not out of office like he wants Zelensky. Because
no, what he said was, again, you're misrepresenting what he said. Again, I don't like Mike Johnson, and I don't like Trump. And I think Trump is many times worse than Biden because he's doing shit, right? Like he's just, fucking everything up. Biden was handled by bad people, but they were trying to keep the integrity of the government intact. They're both, they are both running the country into the ground, but Trump is, Biden was a puppet, and Trump is handled, but he's also, acting on his own. And he's, a piece of shit who lied to these people, and he's embraced truth or narrative, so he tried to pretend to be a truther, and he's fucking the opposite of that, right? He's a billionaire, and he exploits people. So I don't like Trump, and I don't like Mike Johnson, but the reality of the thing is Mike Johnson said this. He said that to negotiate this thing, either he has to fucking put his tail between his legs and come back begging like a fucking beggar, humiliated, and, with a fucking attitude of, I got to do whatever it takes to make amends here, or they need to replace him because Trump ain't going to deal with him in any other capacity, and he doesn't have to because they're coming to us for money, right? It's like, your loan shark business changed leadership, right? Like there's a new leader of someone bought your debts and different loan shark, and this guy ain't fucking around, right? Like the Trump is not, Joe Biden had every reason to continue doling out money because he had a whole, they were money laundering, and Joe Biden was benefiting from that. The American people's money going to the Ukraine in these military-industrial complex, where Trump is like, fuck you, we're cutting a new deal. And so your loan shark is no longer the same guy, and you came in with an attitude, and he's like, all right, we'll cut off your fucking thumbs, right? So, that's what's up right now.
apparently getting mad at the guy bombing your country is a step too far.
That's not what it was. They had a thing where they said, don't talk about security. This is just about positively, give Trump a win, give Americans something they believe they've gotten, which is this raw earth minerals, and don't talk about these security guarantees, which is a hard sell to the American people. And he came out like a, whiny little bitch, and now he wants to make the deal. But he's fucked it, right? Like, there's no deal to be made. You fucked it. Like, and you've got a chance to sign it 3 times, right?
And Speaker Johnson isn't the only one who has been pushing this. Take, for example, Senator Lindsey Graham, one of Zelensky's earliest and loudest cheerleaders, now calling on him to step down as well. And then there's the man who escorted the Ukrainian president out of the White House after the meeting, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. He told CNN that Zelensky was the one not negotiating in good faith. Again, this from the same guy who once compared Zelensky to Winston Churchill. Not every Republican is on board with this, and plenty of Democrats are furious over how all of this went down. And the one person who should be handling all of this, the Secretary of State, America's top diplomat, Marco Rubio, well, he is the guy who just sat there, grimacing in his chair, observing from afar as this whole mess unfolded, melting into the couch. On ABC News today, Rubio said he's had no communication with Zelensky since Friday, adding that, quote, "You cannot end a war unless both sides come to the table."
Okay, so let me show you the other piece here. I saw something from Fox, where they were talking about, you had 3 times to sign, you had 3 opportunities to sign the deal. Zelensky now wants back in. I'll go use my phone and tape what I watched before, unless it shows up here. But let me go to this Trump thing first. So this is serious because Trump posted this on Truth Social, and then reposted it on Twitter. He doesn't do much posting on Twitter, and so if he wants to promote his own thing through social. A statement from President Donald J. Trump. We had a meaningful meeting in the White House today. Much was learned that could never be understood without conversation under such fire and pressure. It's amazing what comes out through emotion, and I've determined that President Zelensky is not ready for peace if America is involved because he feels our involvement gives him a big advantage in negotiations. I don't want advantage, I want peace. He disrespected the United States of America and its cherished Oval Office. He can come back when he's ready for peace. This is, whatever happens, this guy's going to have to suffer some public humiliation. He's going to have to apologize, which he's not willing to do. And I'll show you this other clip. I'll go get it off the TV. It'll just be easier to do it that way. And he's going to have to, deal with these issues in terms of the ingratitude and all these things. He's going to have to take the right attitude. He's got to come with the idea of a guy who just got his ass kicked, right? And so, not only by Russia, but now by Trump. Like, Trump just give him a thumping, but Ukraine got its ass kicked by Russia. No longer saying that you guys are winning and they're beating Russia and we're just on the cusp of destroying Russia. That was the whole neocon agenda, and it didn't work out that way. Russia's just beat the shit out of you. They have military superiority, and you've blown through all this money, and you've run through all the goodwill. I'm sure the European countries aren't psyched about possibly being involved in war and the monies that are being spent, right? I mean, it's not a popular decision around the world because everyone's suffering from inflation, and they're worried about their own, and they don't give a shit about the Ukraine, and they've already spent so much money and time, and now they got to send their troops over there, France and England, these other countries. So, with all of these things, he's got to come with a guy who's just got his ass kicked. Like, he's got to come in like a beggar. That's the only, Trump is, whatever that was done purposefully here, that's been the rhetoric. You guys lost. If you guys want peace, you got to figure out, ways that you're going to give up shit so the Russians stop kicking the shit out of you, right? That's Trump's opinion on this thing, that, Russia is, and he's much more aligned with Putin because Putin didn't campaign against him. And Trump sees Zelensky as a Biden guy, right? I don't know if I said this before, but I think I was talking to my wife about it, but Trump is like, this is a Biden guy. Zelensky's a Biden guy. He's not a Trump guy. He campaigned against Trump, and Trump don't like that shit. Trump believes the most important thing to Trump is that you like Trump and you praise Trump. Bibi and Putin are Trump guys. Trump thinks of himself as, friends with Bibi and Putin, and those are guys who have learned to, kiss Trump's ass and praise him, and because of that, he's, he thinks that these are his guys, right? Trump has loyalty to whatever extent until it doesn't serve him anymore, because at the heart of it, he's narcissistic. But he has these people he's loyal to, and Zelensky isn't one of those people. Zelensky's a Biden guy, so he's a representation of the mistake that Biden made in the war, the mistake that Trump would have won if the election wasn't rigged against him. And so this guy has one opportunity to save his country and his position, and he's come and licked Trump's fucking boots and beg for forgiveness and come in with, a deal that makes the Russians happy and Trump happy. And I think his country's going to allow him to do that, especially the warmongers over there. And so this thing's pretty much fucked. Let me show you the other clip here.
Address Congress this week as he faces growing fallout at home and abroad following that Oval Office clash with Ukrainian President Zelensky.
Okay, so in terms of the official story, I want to address this as the official story and then the underlying story, right? But she says growing fallout at home and abroad. Trump isn't, the American people aren't upset that we're not going to give Ukrainians any more money. The American people have many more things they're concerned about. Some of them might not like the way Trump behaved. Some of them might want to blame him and Trump, J.D. Vance. Democrats think they're bullying Zelensky. There might be some of that. But that's not anything new. Like, you didn't think Trump was like this, right? You didn't think Trump was a bully or he was like, whatever his behavior was. That behavior's new. You didn't see this ever before? Of course you did. It's silly, right? So, whatever ways people are upset or not upset at Trump or whatever, things going on, the American people aren't going to storm the streets and riot because we're not giving more money to a war we don't have anything, they don't benefit from at all, right? But the Europeans stand to lose a lot, right? Because Trump has already talked about not wanting to be a part of NATO because he says there's an ocean between us and the other country. And it's, simplistic, but that's what Trump is all about, right? And I don't think they think anything more of him. Maybe they think he's trying to bully them or make a deal or whatever, and that, whatever that is, they understand that about him in terms of negotiating style. But they know that they can't stand up to Russia because they don't have the nuclear arsenal that Russia has. Whatever nuclear weapons they have is nothing compared to what the Americans have. And America has a far more superior army. That's why there is NATO. That's why America has a world reserve currency, so that America would become the army for Europe, right? Because the Europeans are tired of fighting wars. They were so warlike for years. If you understand all the wars that took place in Europe between France and England and Spain and these countries, and they're, all across the globe, they fought these wars for territories, and then, all the fighting within these countries, England with Ireland and Scotland and all these places that are, these suppressed people, these oppressed peoples in various places in Europe, the Viking Wars, the invasions, and all this stuff that happened, right? All the things that happened over the years. There's just been all these wars, the Crusades and all this bullshit, right? And then all the foreign wars in the World War I and World War II and all this other stuff, and now all these wars in Afghanistan, Iraq, and they're all tired. Europeans don't want to fight wars, as Americans don't. Like, they've just become pussies, right? It's not that, I'm pro-war, but, American people and the American youth and the European youth have been pampered by lifestyle, and they don't want to get out. I mean, think about these kids fighting a war like there had to be a draft. These kids who can't even, work at frickin' McDonald's for, more than a couple hours before quitting. They can't even be in the real world. Other than drone warfare, they're not capable of anything. But Europe benefits from NATO more than America does, because America, whatever wars that we've gone into, and they've contributed very little, right? The wars with Iraq and Afghanistan, those things, because they knew that if the whole idea of NATO is to stand up to Russia. And Zelensky fucked that all up, right? They're not mad at Trump because Trump isn't budging, and Trump holds all the cards. Like Trump said, you don't have any cards. You're a guy who's just gotten his ass kicked, that's been begging for money from all these countries, and there's just no interest in people around the world giving you more money and giving you more support. So you better put your tail between your legs and make a deal with Putin. And so on the surface, there's none of those things. Trump isn't the one who's under the gun. Zelensky's got to repair this thing, which we'll get into in a bit, right? It's obvious because he doesn't have the cards, right? He's begging for shit, right? So the only pressure on Trump is BlackRock. I covered this clip from Kennedy that said BlackRock bought, when we gave the money to the Ukraine, it was for rights to their farmland, which has been signed over to BlackRock and these other things. And BlackRock doesn't get that land if Russia takes over the Ukraine, right? BlackRock is out all that, all that American money that we gave them, so BlackRock could get these contracts, and all these companies that would be into rebuilding the Ukrainian cities, all these, American companies, upon trillion, like probably end up being trillions of dollars of American taxpayer money going to rebuild this country, where Trump and his stooges and all these other people would make bank on that. So, Trump has his handlers, and so whatever pressure is on Trump, it's to make sure Russia doesn't take over the Ukrainian properties that are now owned by America because of this $350 billion money that was dumped in there and was was distributed and laundered through this country through all these various entities, and they all got a piece, including Zelensky. And I'm not saying the BlackRock thing is true because, when you're dealing with this kind of thing, with any of these big stories, there's so much like just bullshit that comes out. Like this woman saying Trump's the one under pressure. Trump isn't under any pressure at all. Trump is not obligated to make this deal happen unless the powers that be, his financial handlers, say you got to make this deal so we can launder more money. But again, the American people have had enough with it, so you have to take that into consideration. Even those guys have to take that into consideration. But in terms of what we know, they throw out all this disinformation or little, like we just heard that it's going around the right-wing bozos, the Cubies and the right-wing Trumpers, that Ukraine had something to do with the assassination attempt at Trump, right? That kind of shit. Where people just talk shit and throw things out and they believe it because it's part of their worldview. It's just convenient because they want to demonize Zelensky, and it's just fucking silly, right? And so, these are the kind of things that make the truth community suck, and all of it suck, because you'll never get to the bottom of it, because it's just lies on top of lies, and you think you know something, but then you do a little bit more deeper research, you find something else, and there's no way to figure any of these things out. But at some point, this thing is going to be, established. And Trump was saying in the beginning, Zelensky's, you got your ass kicked, and we're tired of giving you money, and you lost your friend in Biden, who was a Ukrainian guy, and his son Hunter had, ties to the country. And so you guys are going to have to fucking come to the table with your tail between your legs. And Zelensky wasn't buying it, and now he's going to be pressured by Europe not to blow up this whole thing, and, all of it. Somehow this is going to end up in World War III anyway. I'm completely convinced of that based in, the Whispers prophecies and what I see happening. And just a divine need to erase this abomination of a global system off the face of the earth. And so wars are a way to do that. But anyways, for them to come out and pretend that Trump is the one under the gun. And so, that's the first piece.
Zelensky now saying that he believes this relationship can be salvaged. Zelensky meeting with UK and European allies over the weekend, who are now racing to bridge the divide between the United States and Ukraine.
So to fully know what's going on here, you'd have to know all the parties involved who have interest in this and what leverage they have over Trump or what leverage they have over America, right? BlackRock, whatever it is, right? What, political leverage they have, whatever leverage they have. But Zelensky has zero leverage. I mean, he has, these handlers and people who are laundering money through the country, American taxpayer dollars. If BlackRock is at the center of this thing or some other evil corporation, whatever that is, right? But, this guy is not, like Trump said, you don't have the cards. You don't have anything. You don't have leverage in this situation. You're asking for money, and your leverage isn't, if, after they take over Ukraine, because it would take some time for Russia to conquer the whole country of Ukraine, right? And then what happens? Do they go into Poland? If he doesn't go into Poland, then we don't fucking, have to deal with it. If he goes into Poland, then we're in World War III. So that's up to Putin. Putin hasn't shown any proclivity to go and create a war with NATO, which creates a war with America. He's avoided it, like I said. So if he doesn't do that, then he just takes the Ukraine and all the assets that are there, and the Americans then and the Europeans then deal with the Ukrainians, with Russia, over the rare earth minerals and these other things, and Putin is in a much more powerful position. And so that's what they want to avoid, but, Trump doesn't give a shit about that. Putin and him are Hunter laptop buddies, right? But him sitting here pleading with the Europeans, Trump doesn't give a shit about NATO. He's already said that he wants out, right? So, they're just going to tell him, hey, stick your tail between your legs and go back. And, and he seems like maybe either he's just really stubborn, he's really a dick, he seems like such a weasel, or the people that are handling him are not letting him do that. And, they'll threaten his family. I mean, that's a guy who really has assassination as a likely future, right? This guy is, in a country that's very corrupt and it's falling apart. It's a war-torn country, and they have a lot of, political violence.
Let's bring in NBC News senior White House correspondent Garrett Haake, former U.S. ambassador to Russia Michael McFaul, and former advisor to Ukrainian President Zelensky Igor Novikov.
Okay, so I hadn't taped this guy at the end. I didn't hear him speak. But he's got a shirt that says "Falling in Reverse." He's wearing a T-shirt. And he's got some kind of demonic Rubik's Cube on the front of it.
Okay, so Garrett, Zelensky signaling today he believes the U.S.-Ukraine alliance can be repaired. Is that the view out of the White House this morning?
It is, Anna, although there's certainly frustration from White House aides who feel like their patience and Americans' wallets for this conflict are not unlimited. But the National Security Advisor was on television this morning. It suggested there's basically three things they need to see from Zelensky to start repairing this relationship. The first is the gratitude that they feel like was missing from that Oval Office meeting where you heard J.D. Vance ask him about saying thank you. The second is a willingness to sign the minerals deal that was on the table on that day. Zelensky has said he's still willing to do so.
If you watch my other videos, there's a guy that was on Fox, and he said, he was the guy sitting next to Marco Rubio. And he said he went to the Ukraine, and Zelensky said he was going to sign the deal there, and then he backed out. And then he was going to sign it in Munich with J.D. Vance and Rubio, and they backed out again. So this was part of the frustration with the Trumpers, because it's like some people have, like borderline personality disorder people, have trouble resolving things, right? And I don't know what's going on with him, but somebody who says they're going to do something but never does, and then sabotages it, and then says, oh, I was going to sign it all along, right? But they don't want to sign it anymore. Oh, yeah, but I was going to sign it. Well, and then he goes to the Europeans and whines about how he's the victim. Oh, I was going to sign it, but they wouldn't let me, like there's so long that's going to go when you're a fucking beggar. You have no fucking cards here. I mean, you have some assets that we want, like America wants, right? Whatever, in terms of the official story, and in terms of the farmland and the rare earth minerals, the raw earth, as Trump called it. So, but other than that, you have no bargaining chips, and so he's going to have to do these things, or it's not going to get done.
The third is an apology from Zelensky for his behavior in the Oval Office. Zelensky has said in subsequent interviews that he doesn't think he needs to apologize, that he's not sure he did anything wrong.
So lots of people are saying Trump and J.D. Vance plan to double team this guy. But they're not showing you the beginning of the whole process. Now, if they're good actors and they acted, then great. I mean, I'd be shocked about that. I don't think Trump is that good of an actor, or any of these people are. It seemed like genuine, like a genuine interaction. I always think things are rigged and staged, but this one, didn't see that way, because Trump in the beginning was really positive. And he just talked about the raw earth and how great it was for America, and this was a new partnership, and that they were going to go in the other room and sign it. And then they started to take questions, and Trump said some things that seemed to piss Zelensky off, and he started talking about security guarantees and, having American troops there and all these things. And saying Europe had done as much, and confronting Trump about, America hadn't given more money and all these things, right? Calling bullshit on Trump. And he was very agitated, and he broke in a few times because Trump was answering all the questions and he wanted to say things. And you can hear by what he was saying that it sounded like he was backing out of the deal, and that this deal wasn't that important. He said the deal wasn't enough. It had to come with security guarantees, which Trump already said he wasn't going to give. And all of these advisors had said, all these American advisors said, don't bring up the security guarantees in this thing. We're just going to go in there, have a positive, conversation, and then go in the back. And maybe he thought Trump was violating that by saying shit that he didn't like Trump was just being Trump. And so he got pissed off. You could see he was getting irritated, and he interrupted some of the reporters so he could give his side of the story. And he started talking shit about Putin. They rolled out those pictures. Those pictures weren't part of the mineral deal. He was talking about how evil Russia is, and that was all he came in with a plan. This was a negotiating strategy. He was trying to negotiate in front of the media, which he knew half of them are really against Trump and the American people. That's what J.D. Vance called him on. And so, if this was an organic interaction, that's what happened. He's the one who blew it up and sabotaged it, right? And so for him to say I didn't do anything wrong, well, you've been told by everybody, either this is what you were supposed to do, your handler said to do this, and you had no choice. And of course you're going to say that you did nothing wrong, but everyone else knows what you did, because Trump is a known entity. It's not like they're shocked that Trump reacted this way. It's 100%. If you wanted to trigger Trump, you would do what Zelensky did, right? In fact, I was kind of surprised it took Trump that long to go off, because he was saying things that would totally piss Trump off. Sometimes Trump has to get away from an interaction and think about things and get pissed. He's clearly pissed now. And everyone knows how to piss Trump off, right? Everyone knows that you disrespect him in a way like this and insult him, and then say other people are better than him, or, all these things that Zelensky did, saying the Europeans had been his better, friend than America, and all these things he's implied. It's just the kind of shit that would piss Trump off, and it did. And so for whatever, if you think this is organic, like I think it's, whatever. I believe it's an organic event based on the fact that Trump came in praising Zelensky, and it seemed like they were going in one direction, and Zelensky took it in another. And whatever reason he did that, it fucked him in this country. And now he's got to do damage control. And Trump doesn't have to do shit, right? And so for him to say, I don't think I did anything wrong, people have told you what you did wrong. You knew what you did, right? Like either you did this on purpose. Like he's the one that provoked this thing on purpose. Like it was, it wasn't a shock to see what happened, right? Like, everything that he did is like if you had a book on how to provoke Trump, he followed every chapter in that book to the letter of the law, right?
To the degree that all politics is personal with Donald Trump, it may take Zelensky being willing to swallow his pride on that third point to repair the personal part of this relationship, move things forward again with this White House.
So we'll see how this plays out. Again, there'll be an outcome. And, when you think, like I said, the American people think you're getting raw earth minerals, you're not getting shit. They gave $350 billion to Ukraine of your money, taxpayer money, printed money that's going to cause inflation, stuff that's, a lot of the military spending isn't even included in the budget. And so, we have, as Elon Musk said, we have a $7 billion budget, and we have a $7 trillion budget and a $5 trillion wallet and another $1 trillion in interest. And so, anytime we have to print more money, that means your prices are going to go up in the grocery store. And so whatever this comes out, it's going to screw you. Like we're getting screwed. And I think, eventually it has to be World War III. Like whatever happens, that's the inevitable ending to this story. Okay, so I'm going to wrap this one up. I got one more little thing here about Trump and Zelensky.
President Trump hitting back at Ukrainian President Zelensky just a short time ago on President Zelensky's comments in London yesterday during a briefing where he said, quote, an agreement to end the war is still very, very far away, and no one has started all these steps yet. President Trump responded to Zelensky by saying, quote, this is the worst statement that could have been made by Zelensky. And America will not put up with it for much longer.
Much longer? Why this long? Why not just cut him off, bro? Like, what do you mean?
I was saying this guy doesn't want there to be peace as long as he has America's backing and Europe. In the meeting they had with Zelensky, stated flatly that they cannot do the job without the U.S. Probably not a great statement to have been made in terms of show of strength against Russia. What are they thinking?
What are they thinking?
Democrats aren't outraged by President Zelensky. They're mad at President.
They got a lot more pep over at Fox.
Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and Putin believe that they're going to intimidate and bully and threaten President Zelensky to join the club of corrupt and unprincipled leaders.
Oh, my God. This guy is a complete scumbag. They all are.
They will literally need to wait until hell freezes over twice, because this is a man who is committed to the survival of his country.
Holy shit.
Propaganda is what's coming out of J.D. Vance's mouth, and it's Russian propaganda.
I saw the meeting as a despicable display of bullying by the president.
It was Vice President Vance, particularly, who was on the offense, who was berating.
Geez, Nancy, why didn't you become president?
President Zelensky.
It is absolutely shameful what is happening right now. The White House has become an arm of the Kremlin.
I just have never felt such shame about American policy before, and I don't know how our allies trust us after this.
Putin and his cronies are probably popping champagne bottles right now.
We have someone that is occupying the White House, and as far as I'm concerned, he is an enemy to the United States.
Kaboom. All right, so, everything that I said before. All right, let's get into the other stuff here. Okay, Island Boys Frankie Venegas. Venegas? Venegas Arnold. Island Boy Frankie something or other here. Arrested for gun and drug offenses. So I was going to do a thing with this. I've had this up for a while. One of my viewers sent it to me. But I just haven't had the time and the energy to go Island Boys hunting, see if they could have some entertaining things that they always do. I'll come back to this. Wasn't he the one who tongue kissed his brother? Yeah, you know it was him. You don't ask those questions. That's not a real question, bro. We all know he's the one. There's only two of them. He's rocking the hairdo here. So we always knew that these island boys were going to end up in prison. And so here's the thing with Gene Hackman here. There's him and his wife. There they are when they were younger. And here they are decrepit and old. Here's a better picture of that. This is them recently. So, I mean, just, she's old and she's much younger than he is. And that doesn't, you wouldn't even recognize him as Gene Hackman. My dad ended up looking like this. My dad was always overweight. And then, I didn't see them for a few years and he lost a bunch of weight. Then I didn't see him for about 5 years and he lost even more weight. And the last time I saw him, he was just basically a walking skeleton. And just the skin and, whatever. I mean, they keep you alive long after you should have died. And I don't even know what's keeping you going when your physical body has deteriorated so much. There's a lot of foul play. Let me switch over to a voiceover here. Let me go back to these pictures here. He was always old. My whole life, I guess they married when he was younger. And, but I remember he was pretty much bald his whole adult life in his early movies. And I don't remember a movie where he didn't look old, as an older person. Like, I don't think the guy was ever young. And he just sort of lasted forever. He hung on there. Let me switch over to voiceover here. I haven't covered celebrity culture much anymore because, it wasn't bringing in the viewers like it had before. I used to get hundreds of thousands of views, sometimes millions of views. And now because of YouTube's algorithms, it really doesn't benefit for me to cover Hollywood. And Hollywood's kind of important because it has such an effect on people's internal world. I've said that since the beginning. So it isn't like it shouldn't be covered. It's just that I can't do it anymore. And I was covering all these Hollywood celebrities dropping like flies, and that had to do with the bloop, the rooster and all that stuff. And people have kind of moved on from that. Aren't concerned about that. I was covering that on my other channel. And so, if I don't have to cover celebrities, I'm not going to do it. And, I've moved on from a lot of the different kinds of videos I used to make before. You just can't remake the same videos over and over again. And I've made a lot of videos about celebrities dying in weird circumstances. And this is a very weird circumstance where he and his wife and his dog all died. And it happened in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And that's mostly what I want to talk about. It's also where Alec Baldwin shot his director, his coworker. And it's a very corrupt place, at least when I was there. I was there in 2000 or 1995. And so I lived there for, I guess till 2000. My dog's barking. I always yell at him. One time I have to include my yelling at my dog to stop barking. I'm sure it doesn't sound very pleasant. It's going to be quite a bit louder than what I'm talking right now. Usually they're sitting in with me here, but I don't know what happened, and then they're barking at something. Anyways, so 2000, 1999, I think we moved 2000 to, so 5 years. I was there basically 5 years. I worked up in Los Alamos, which is a really weird town, and I'll want to talk about that separately. I lived in Albuquerque for a little bit and then moved to Santa Fe. The West was just a complete different, it's totally different than the East Coast. I lived in Connecticut and Florida and Atlanta, and I had, been through all these states on the East Coast, pretty much all the eastern states, at least the ones that are on the ocean, the number of these other states, and I drove across the country. And now I've lived in 3 time zones. I lived out in the West twice. I liked Nevada and Utah a lot better than I did New Mexico. New Mexico is really an interesting state. I think it has one of the few places in the world that has all the various types of climates. And, the culture there is there's a lot of corruption. I always had a connection to the Native American culture, whatever it was, when I was a kid. I always gravitated to the Native Americans. I like the Native Americans. Like I root for the Indians in the Cowboys and Indians movies. Whatever, my past life was with that. And, I went to New Mexico. I thought there would be where I'd have some contact with Native American people. It just didn't happen. And when I went to graduate school, I had a professor who was a Native American. He was in a band, in some kind of rock band, and everyone would tell him their problems, and someone recommended he become a counselor. He ended up doing that for a number of years. And he was good at it. I could see he was an easy to talk to person. But he was one of my professors, and then they brought in a few other Native American, like guest speakers and things. But for the most part, it's very, they had in Santa Fe, New Mexico, the white people are rich Californian trust funders or rich divorcees who, lived in California with their husbands, new age liberal women who were, in their 40s, 50s, or, older, for the most part. And then there was like 70% women to men. And there were these women who, there's all this new age stuff. There's these new age hotbeds, and Santa Fe is one of them. And then there's 1/3 white people, 1/3 Hispanic, and 1/3 Native American. And it's very divided. It's the most segregated culture that I've ever been a part of. I didn't interact with people so much there, but I was always felt like it's a very weird place. On the license plate it says Land of Enchantment, but then people call it the Land of Entrapment. And I like the West, so I thought it was great there. I liked parts of it, but there's a lot of like I said, division there. My ex's daughter, who was like in kindergarten, early, she was going to school, and the kids used to make fun of her because she was white. There was a lot of reverse prejudice. When I hear all these people whine about being prejudiced against the various groups, most of these groups also exhibit these same behaviors. When my ex's daughter would get off the bus, they would yell at her or stuff like that just because she was white. Like there was a lot of that kind of stuff. And so, when people demonize white people for racism and prejudice, when the white people aren't in the majority here, it'll be the same thing. Unfortunately, this is what people do. And they were teaching these kids to be kind of racist when they are 5, 6 years old. Kids usually don't even notice shit like that. It was pretty bad. And so, there was just a lot of corruption. I knew of some people. I lived in a couple different shared houses, and this one guy worked in the government, or maybe was dating some, a woman who worked in a courtroom, and it was just very corrupt. Like a lot, just really kind of almost third world type of corruption and things like this. And Los Alamos is a really weird place because all the doctors there, and I worked there. Really fucking weird. And I'll get into that at some point. And Espanola, which was right below Los Alamos, had the highest per capita heroin addiction rate, and there are a lot of gang activity, and just it was it was a fucked up place. The whole there's beautiful scenery and interesting, but just not a place that the only more fucked up place I lived in was the Virgin Islands in terms of corruption, where the place is. As long as you're not dealing with the system and the police or whatever it is, it's okay. But if you get into any kind of issues, it's just and I don't know what it's like now, but given what they've done with Alec Baldwin, the way they milked that fucking thing, and now Gene Hackman, they came out and said no foul play, and this thing was riddled with foul play. When you hear the story of his wife and him and his wife and his dog dying, they show up and he had, there's money involved. So, again, really weird people there. I went to a graduate school in a very liberal transpersonal master's degree program. And, you have to interact with these people, these really liberal people. Some of them are cool. Some of them I liked, but some are really fucking weird. And that's where these ideas are now being pushed out there, this kind of liberal agenda. There's lots of people that have this kind of stuff, and they're very, they're very isolated in groups with people with the same mindset, and they don't deal with what everybody else thinks and views things as. But anyways, to me it's not a shocker that there's some kind of weird shit going down with Gene Hackman's death because it happened in New Mexico in Santa Fe. But anyways, let me wrap this one up here. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely reporting from the Apocalypse and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.